Hey everybody, I want to talk for a minute about legendary difficulty and how it affects the game and how it also relates to a mod that I have recently started testing out. So I'll get to the mod in just a minute, but I wanted to go ahead and share my own thoughts first of all about legendary difficulty and what it means with respect to regular vanilla Warhammer. So, of course, as everybody is no doubt aware, when you change this difficulty right here, it affects basically your campaign settings. So it affects things like the cheats that the AI gets. Let's go ahead and read it out loud here. It says, with lower upkeep costs, enemy factions will field more armies and make swifter campaign progress while enjoying many other bonuses. It doesn't go into what all the different bonuses are, but you can pretty much imagine what they are. They get boosts to their economy, to their building, to their research. I don't know if they get public order boosts or not, but since public order is really never much of an issue for the AI, that probably doesn't even really matter very much. Anyway, as you adjust these difficulty settings right here, obviously those bonuses that the AI gets, most people refer to them as cheats, those cheats that the AI gets scale downward. Now, the player, of course, also has their own cheats, or let's call them the negatives that apply to them. The main one that comes to my mind is the public order penalty. You get -8 in all of your provinces in public order on legendary difficulty. That's just a universal setting. It doesn't even really mention it here, does it? No, it really doesn't. It just talks about what happens to the AI. Anyway, but yeah, obviously anybody who's played on Legendary difficulty is no doubt aware that you get an additional penalty here in your own public order based on what your difficulty setting is, and then for Legendary it's at -8. Then you've got your battle difficulty, which it only doesn't go up to Legendary, just goes up to very hard. Basically, you can see right here, it affects obviously the tactical behavior of units. And then additionally on top of that, you've got your AI stats modifier right here. So what I have always done until very, very recently is I just have always set everything to the very hardest possible settings. Very recently, I've started tinkering around with lowering the AI stats modifier. I've tried dropping it down to this one right here, which is just a couple of notches below the maximum, and the reason that I do that is mainly because of leadership. What happens when you set this all the way up to maximum here, that leadership +8, what it means is in battles you've got factions, you've got races that behave in a very uncharacteristic fashion, and the example that I generally use here are the Skaven. When you give all of the Skaven a +8 leadership bonus, that is such a large chunk percentage-wise of their leadership. They start to behave not the normal way that Skaven behave, which is, they break and run very quickly, but then they turn around, they regroup, and you can throw them back into combat, and the AI does that as well. Well, all of a sudden you start running into a problem with their leadership being boosted like that. They don't break and run. In fact, quite often you'll end up going into battles and you'll see your front line, let's say the Empire. Your front line doesn't really have any leadership advantage over the Skaven at all, and they hold up in very uncharacteristic Skaven fashion. Anyway, that's a little bit off topic for what I wanted to mostly focus on here, but I just wanted to talk about these difficult settings. And so what does all this mean in terms of vanilla Warhammer? Well, what it means is that the most challenging part of almost every campaign, it's not universal, but it's almost universal. The most challenging part of almost every Warhammer 3 campaign is the very beginning of the campaign. And basically, once you build up a little bit of a kind of a mini empire for yourself, but you kind of stabilized. You've defeated your first enemy. Things have stabilized. Combine this with the fact that the AI has its own campaign issues in terms of its aggression, which hopefully the CA is working on addressing that, but again, a little bit beyond the scope of what I'm talking about here. Mainly once you get things under control in your own little mini empire and you can start to expand then as best fits your own circumstances, the campaign just basically gets easier and easier. Okay, so what does all that mean then with respect to modding? Well, what I've been messing around with is a mod. Let me just back up for 1 second. This is fine for a lot of people, and it's fine, I think, for certain factions. I think it gets very old having every single campaign feel like it's basically over with after just a few dozen turns. Meaning, yeah, once you kind of, let's say I've gotten turn 25, 30, 35 or so, whether or not you're going to win the campaign. And at that point, it becomes kind of tedious to just, continue to go through the motions of expansion and conquest and capturing all of the victory objectives. So is there a way to change the dynamic of campaigns so that it's not always the early game that's the most difficult part of the campaign? Okay, sorry for the very long build-up, but I thought it was important to kind of establish why we need mods that change that dynamic in terms of the beginning of the campaign being, generally speaking, the most challenging part of it, and then it just tends to get easier and easier as the campaign goes on. Okay. So I'm going to introduce you now to this is scaling AI difficulty. There are two flavors of this. I'll talk about the other one in a moment. This is another one from Serb, who is the same mod author who wrote the previous mod that I talked about on this channel, which is this video here, the must-have mod to make Conquest more realistic. And so this one is called Scaling AI Difficulty. And I'm going to take a minute here just to read through the introduction here of his description. And he says basically, much more succinctly, what I just spent the last 5 minutes saying, which is, ever find the early game to be a great level of difficulty, but then you level out pretty early and it just becomes a tedious slog. So there you have it. This mod seeks to change that by giving any AI faction small stacking advantages every 10 turns up to turn 100. At turn 1, they have no extra buffs and function as normal. By turn 100, these buffs will have become quite large, allowing AI to maintain the pace against a player, even with their poor building choices and questionable battle AI. How does it work? Every 10 turns, a script will fire off that gives any AI-controlled factions small stacking buffs to their. I'm not going to read through every single number here, but upkeep, growth, recruitment, maximum armies, building, recruit ranks, spells, winds of magic, reserves, ambush, winds recharge in battle, research rate. So all of those things start out unmodified, but slowly over time, the AI will get larger and larger buffs to those. So what does that mean? Well, it's very dramatically affecting that dynamic that I just mentioned, where the beginning of the campaign being the hardest part. Don't get me wrong, the beginnings of campaigns are still going to be quite challenging for the player. This isn't going to completely eliminate that, and you don't want it to be completely eliminated, but what you do want to see is you want to see the AI not so quickly reach that tipping point where all of a sudden you know that you're just going to start steamrolling them. And the reason why you're delaying or maybe eliminating that tipping point completely is because they're going to continue to get increasing buffs as the campaign goes on. Having said that, this only runs up through turn 100. As those of you who watch the Let's Plays on my channel know, I tend to like the longer campaigns that go well beyond 100 turns. And I think what he says here does make sense in terms of you want to kind of cap it after after a certain point, the benefits will stack. If an AI gets above 100% upkeep reduction, for example, they get pretty stupid, with one settlement faction able to create literally infinite armies. So you have to be very careful in terms of just how much you stack up some of these bonuses, because some weird things can result. But this is pretty good. I think this is definitely a step in the right direction. Another real benefit to this being one of Serb's mods is, I know from personal experience now, he's very participative. He's very interactive in the comments and making changes based on the feedback that he receives from people. So, definitely a very good positive sign when a mod author is willing to do that. All right, so I mentioned then that there's several different flavors of this mod, and this particular one, this one that just simply says scaling AI difficulty, this also provides debuffs or penalties for the player. So at the same time that the AI is getting all of their buffs, the human players are receiving small debuffs, and in particular to public order, and then also to diplomacy. So the diplomacy one is very interesting. So this is going to make it harder and harder to keep your alliances together, and make it more and more likely that you're going to have more AI factions going to war with you as the game goes on, which definitely adds to the challenging component of a campaign. In the public order aspect of it, this kind of gets back to what I was talking about here in terms of your campaign difficulty. So adding all of these things up together, I could foresee, based on your own personal comfort level, let's say, I don't see anything wrong with playing on legendary difficulty and using the mod, because I think a lot of, particularly with certain factions, certain legendary lords, some of them struggle more in the early game than others do. But in general, the game is not really as challenging as some of us would like it to be. So keep it on legendary difficulty, throw that mod on top if you like the extra challenge. But additionally, you might feel like saying, you know what, I don't love the fact that the AI gets so many cheats, so I'm going to drop this to very hard. And what that means is now your public order penalties that you're getting are not quite as punishing in the early going, but they will increase over time. So that basically just means this mod is providing an opportunity to kind of scale the campaign, to not throw all the difficulty at you up front, but rather to sort of balance it out so that you can, I don't want to say minimize the difficulty in the early going, because you still want it to be fairly challenging, but you can make it so that it's all the challenges not front loaded at the very beginning of the campaign. Hopefully that makes sense. Now, I do feel like there's going to be certain factions. I'm going to test it with both flavors here, jumping back into the mod list here. This one is, of course, the scaling AI difficulty, but if we jump into his workshop and we find there's another one that is called scaling AI difficulty. This is the, okay, scaling AI difficulty, no human penalty. This is, of course, the Radius version. So there's one here for using Radius. And then I know that there's another one out here. Scaling AI difficulty, no human penalty, right here. So this is for the vanilla game, let's just say non-SFO and non-Radius. So the same basic buffs happen for the AI players, but it does not cause a penalty to the human. So what that means is, like, I tend to stack all kinds of other challenges up against me in campaign, and I don't necessarily always feel like I'm going to want the additional public order and diplomacy penalties. They may, for one thing, not feel very thematic, but secondly, they just may not be necessary if you're using some other mods that are already adding lots of additional challenges, which is what I tend to do. So basically, you've got your own option here of either using the scaling AI difficulty that also provides penalties to the human player, or this version right here, which does not provide any penalties. It just gives the buffs to the AI. And anyway, as I was saying, it's unfortunately a little bit hard for me to show this in game. That's why I spent so much time here on the mod pages. It's just because as the human player, you can't see all these different buffs. These are all invisible for the most part to the player while the AI is experiencing them. But you certainly can see how these things can really add up over time. Anyway, give it a try if you like. Not necessarily an additional challenge, but you like the idea of the challenge in a campaign not being quite so front-loaded, instead of being balanced out over a longer period of time. So your campaign continues to provide some challenge as you get up into the mid-game and towards the late game. Okay, I think I'll go ahead and leave it there. Let me know in the comments if any of you have experimented with this particular mod. I've been using it a little bit. It takes a little while for it to build up, so it's kind of subtle in the early going, but I really like the idea of it. Again, wondering if any of you already have more experience with it than what I've had just in my testing here for the last few days. And I think then I'll go ahead and leave this video there. If anybody has any particular recommendations of other mods that you think that I should check out, please, as always, leave those in the comments. Many of the ones that I've already been checking out are based on comments from many of you. And I guess any other feedback is also welcome, so I appreciate all of that as well. Thanks to those of you who have recently joined my brand new Patreon. That is very exciting. You guys are absolute legends as far as I'm concerned. It is very much appreciated. And, subscribe if you're interested in this type of content, or don't. It's up to you. You all know how YouTube works. It's good for me, but anyway, good for my algorithm. But anyway, you guys already understand how all that works. All right. Thanks, everybody, for watching and listening, and I will see you all in the next video.